Welcome to our Play Well podcast series. My name is Marguerite Hunter Blair and I am Chief Executive of Play Scotland, the national organisation for play. Today we are going to look at play as a social justice issue and a spatial justice issue, and consider how by tackling this poverty of play we can achieve better outcomes for children. To explore this topic, I am delighted to be talking to Professor John McKendrick. John was a director of Play Scotland for 10 years and has been researching and ruminating on children's play and environments for play throughout his career. He is coordinating the academic and practitioner panel for IPA 2023 in Glasgow. And last year, he edited a collection on play and education, which is freely available from the Scottish Educational Review. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Marguerite.
John, what do you think makes play a social justice issue in Scotland?
I think first and foremost, children have a right to play. We know through the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, that was one of the rights that was articulated for children. So absolutely, if children don't play or don't have the right quality of play or enough play, then their human rights are not being honoured. So it's a human rights issue for play. But I think it's also, if we move beyond that as a basic human right for children, then I think it's an issue at different scales, and the play as a social justice is different things at different geographical scales and for different populations. So I would argue actually it's an issue of social justice for Scotland, because if Scotland wants to succeed, then I think, and I truly believe that Scotland's children have to have a rich play as a foundation for life, because Scotland benefits through children's play. You think about it even in terms of adults and economy. It's been argued by some that it's not a work ethic that we need for a successful economy, it's a play ethic. We need a creative approach to how we approach economic challenges. So I think health would be in our case. We know, for example, active play is one of the tools that we can use to improve Scotland's poor health record. Education, you'd mentioned, Marguerite, that I'd been involved in some work in education, looking at play in education. And again, it perhaps is a tool, particularly in the early years, but not just in the early years, that play could be used to improve educational outcomes. So I think even it's an issue of social justice for Scotland. That if Scotland wants to be a successful country, then Scotland needs a play that works for Scotland, and that will have economic, it will have health, and it will have education benefits. So it's a social justice issue for Scotland, and it most certainly is a social justice issue in communities, amongst parents, and even with regard to gender too. I could go on all day with this, Marguerite.
I know. I think what I would like to know, John, is your thoughts around children who live in poverty in particular. We kind of saw in lockdown during the recent COVID experience that it was the children who had the least access to gardens and green spaces who played out least. And I just wonder what your thoughts are about how we could tackle that going forward.
One thing that lockdown kind of shone a light on some hidden problems that maybe some people knew, or maybe that some people were talking about, but that many people ignored. And that most certainly was one, that not all children have access to a rich everyday play environment. And in particular, children who live in poverty have much more constrained access to a rich everyday play environment. And those injustices, and I see them as injustices, that poorer children don't have access to the same opportunities for play, come in different forms. There is cases then that some families that live in poverty live in poorer everyday environments. So they might be living in a flat that's near a road, and the families don't have the means to buy themselves a larger house with access to private space, a front garden and a back garden. They live in an area that's not conducive to play. And quite clearly, what was shown up in lockdown, when we were constrained to these environments, that had quite significant impacts in restricting children's opportunities for play. So I think poor everyday environments, and they are more likely to be the environments that poorer families live in, is one constraint in play. But I think we also must acknowledge that some forms of play cost money. Now, we know that play can be free. There's many ways in which perhaps some of the richest and best play opportunities don't cost any money. I think we also can't ignore that some of the more attractive play opportunities for families and for children does cost money. And many children are simply priced out of play. If you think of indoor play centres, for example, which I know was a play environment that was constrained during lockdown, but certainly prior to lockdown, that was something that was part of the play experience of many families in contemporary Britain. But it's quite expensive for a family who are struggling to, put food on the table, or there's several children in that family and money's tight already. So as well as a poor everyday in play environment, some forms of play cost money that's beyond the means of our poorest families. And so what we end up then is, if you like, a cumulative effect. Families that don't have a lot of money to purchase play quality opportunities, families live in environments that don't have a rich doorstep play environment. And that leads, I think, to that cumulative impact, that problems exacerbating problems, that makes play a less rich experience for some of our more disadvantaged children.
I know, John, and I agree with so much of that. And I think because of the COVID pandemic, I've seen recently a lot of research about place and equity. And I think we've got a lot better data from which to inform a lot of the new policies that we now have in Scotland. As you know, we have a play strategy that looks at play at home, play at school, in the community. But we also now have a statutory duty for play and planning. And possibly the most, like the cherry on the cake or the icing on the cake, is UNCRC bringing that into Scots law. But I wonder if you have some thoughts on how we can marry up the research with the policy and in some way use these tools to get some practical improvements in Scotland. How can we use these tools that we have now to make things better? What insight would you have on that?
Yeah, I think Play Scotland's got to be credited with getting these issues on the agenda. I have a long memory. In the early days of Play Scotland, even before your time, Marguerite, I can remember when play was extremely marginal to public debate in Scotland. And the idea of Scotland having a national play strategy was pie in the sky if you go back a couple of decades. So I think we've got ourselves in a decent place where at least it's on the agenda. But what we really need is we need practical actions that follow from these aspirations. So it is all well and good having a fantastic national play strategy, but as you suggest, we actually need concrete actions on the ground. And what that requires is it requires us to have an open mind. It requires us to, think about how our homes, our neighbourhoods, our schools, and I would certainly argue the wider environments beyond home, neighbourhood and school, the kind of obvious places for children's play, how these need to change, how these need to be infused with play for the benefit of children and others. So we need to be open to change, and we need champions that are prepared to share this information and campaign for it. We need to shout loud. There's lots of people shouting loud for their own particular interest in what they believe in. And those that believe in play, I think, have to do likewise as well. So, for example, what we have just now is we have Glasgow, quite rightly, trying to reconfigure the nature of the city to make it a city that's more amenable to sustainable forms of transport. And I think that's fantastic. And some of the plans that are being bandied about just now to transform the city centre, to make it more conducive to walking, to cycling, self-propelled means of transport are great. But we also need that scale of ambition with regard to play. We need to think about how our shopping centres, our streets, even our workplaces could be made more playful. I think we need that sense of play enriches everything that we are. It makes our places better places to be in. It benefits children, it benefits families. And then we've got to, champion the issue, and we've got to bring forward these practical suggestions about what we need to do to include play. The most important thing is not physical change. I think the most important thing is winning over the hearts and minds, to get people to be more playful, to get people to recognise the value of play. And I think the physicality will follow from that. We will change our environment when we realise the value of play. But we need the work that Play Scotland does to continue, and I think we need more people to champion play locally.
I think you're so right, John. We've made such progress with policy in Scotland, but I can't help but feel that when I'm out and about and I see children, young people out playing, I stop and look again, because it's not something we see all the time. It's not the norm. Certainly in my experience driving around Scotland, as I do sometimes going to various events, if I see a lot of particularly older young people playing on maybe a rope swing or something, I do tend to stop and have a look at it to see what is it that has brought them together. Is it a particular combination of things that have happened? that have animated them, to come and play in that area. So I kind of worry that we're really doing well on the policy side and the practical side, but the children and young people are not coming with us, that communities are not particularly welcoming of young people in the public realm, and that possibly that's become quite an institutional thing, that we don't even see the barriers that are up there sometimes. So I think part of it possibly is really engaging with young people about what is it that puts them off or prevents them from coming out into the public realm. And I know you've experienced that as a parent and a grandparent, and I just wondered what your thoughts might be on this and how we can approach this maybe through an intergenerational perspective.
It's a real challenge, because I think in that intergenerational word you used, that's what's happened. I think we've transformed the nature of everyday play. I mean, I suppose it is a sign of your age when you begin to look back with your halcyonic view of the world of yesteryear. But I do kind of look back at my childhood and think, I was lucky, so lucky. I grew up in an environment which would be called a deprived neighbourhood today. It probably would have been called a deprived neighbourhood then, but it was rich, absolutely rich in play opportunities, and it was crammed with children doing all sorts of different types of play, incidental, physical, milling about. It was just a peopled environment. And I think we've lost that. And I think it's even worse that I don't think it's just a case of that the children don't see him. I think it's almost a case of the parents think it's good parenting to kind of fill their children's diaries up with what they believe to be gainful activities. And if you allowed your children a bit of latitude to do their own thing, it's almost a sign of irresponsible parenting. So I think we've really moved so far from what play was in the 1970s when I was growing up, that it's very, very difficult, I think, to get that back. But I do think there would be value if we did recover some of the best of what we had beforehand. If children were allowed to have more independence, not just allowed, but I think facilitated and encouraged to have more independence. I think everybody benefits from a peopled, lively, everyday environment. And I think we lose something when we become, very privatised, and we just live our lives in little boxes, and we travel in little boxes that take us from, one gainful activity to another, and we don't have anything in between. I mean, my daughter just now has decided, she's just went to secondary school, Marguerite, and she's decided, her and her pal, that they walk to school every morning. It's about 1.5 miles to school. When she went for her step-up day from primary school, the 4 kids, it's a wee tiny school next to a larger urban area, and they all decided they would walk down and walk back up from the village into the school. And the secondary school, phoned the primary school to check that this was correct, because they couldn't believe that the children would want to walk 1.5 miles to go to school. But the point is, that's an incidental opportunity for her to socialise, to chat with her pal, to have time away from parents, do whatever she does in that 1.5 miles back from school. And I think we need to encourage more of that. I don't think we're bad people. I don't think we're bad parents and we've tried to make children's life less rich. But I think that's what's kind of happened. We've kind of forgot about the quality of just allowing children time to be playful, allowing children to have time for themselves that's away from educational performance or, acquiring skills through hobbies that are, oriented towards developing competency, and just allowing them to be. And I think the great irony of all this actually is that parents' lives would improve too, because parents' lives are so time stressed by they assume the responsibility to take their children from A to B to C to D and then back again, is that it makes parenting a much more difficult job than it probably was a few generations ago as well. So I think for lots and lots of reasons we should try and get that back, but it's not going to be easy because we're so far removed from where we were.
I think you're right. And I think a lot of children go from school sometimes straight into a homework club. Yeah. But how much nicer to walk half an hour home and have a bit of a chat and a blether and really de-stress, before you even think of getting out the homework again.
Absolutely.
I think another bugbear of mine is you're talking about, all the activities that children get plugged into. And what that can quite often lead to is children playing very much in their own age range, which they do in the school day as well. And as we all know, when we go into the world of work, we don't work in our own age range. We have to learn to get on with people from all ages. And I think this is one of the things I'm particularly interested in, is about how we can return in some ways to what you talked about of that model in earlier years, where you played with all the children in your street, and the older ones then kept an eye out for the younger ones, and parents then felt much more at ease to let children play out on the street because they knew there was other people there that could keep an eye on them. And I think there probably is a lot of support that we need to offer parents to get to that sense that our parents possibly had, that if you were out playing, that was a good place, that was a safe place. It wasn't something to worry about now. Whereas I suspect if children go out to play, some parents might feel very anxious about that.
You talked about me as a parent. I can remember the first time my eldest daughter, mother herself, but when she first wanted to go to the shops herself, we're living in England at the time, and I was petrified. Be honest. The thought of her going to the shops scared the living daylights out of me. What I did actually is I stalked her. Stalked her from a safe distance that she never saw me. And the wee thing was petrified herself because I've never seen her move as quick in my life. She basically sprinted to the shops and sprinted back again. But, that was that letting go. That was the thing that had to be done for me as a parent, to let go, was to see that she could handle it, she could go herself, but also make it, make it clear that not to give myself away, because I wanted to give her the sense of her being independent. So I think it's hard for parents. It's hard for parents to see that as responsible parenting is letting go. And responsible parenting is not, mollycoddling or holding on for too long. But I think parents have to be reassured that that's okay. That's good parenting. It's not bad parenting to let your kid have that little bit of independence.
And I think that's one of the things that communities can do. If they come together and agree that children are maybe walking to school, or they're going for a cycle on a Saturday morning, or they're doing things together, that parents can actually, by engaging in local communities and forming friendships, can pave the way for that. And I think during lockdown, one of the positive things I heard from people were saying, actually, we discovered the area we lived in. Before we went to work, we came home from work. That was the essence of it. We went shopping at the weekend. But people then started to walk around their neighbourhoods and appreciate what they had on their doorstep.
You're right. I mean, that's certainly what we did as a family, but we did it as a family. It wasn't a case of like Morven, my youngest daughter, went out and discovered the neighbourhood herself. And I think that's what we need to do. We as a family discovered that our everyday environment, which we'd kind of ignored, had much more to offer us in terms of everyday walking and cycling opportunities. But it still was as a family. I think what we really need to do is we really need to let children have that independence to use the neighbourhoods too. They discovered it with their family, let them discover it with their friends, let them use that space more often. It's a big transition, and it's not a case of regression. It's not a giving up in progress. It's trying to recover the best of what we had, and because children gained a lot by having that independence. As you said, that multi-generational play, which is much more difficult to achieve if it's not incidental, because the minute you're in an organised setting, you do tend to have it organised by age group. So it happens a lot less often. So yeah, strongly encourage that.
John, I'm just wondering, just putting you on the spot, if you had top tips to give us as to what you think we should be doing about poverty and social justice in Scotland here and now, what do you think? What advice would you give us?
Well, for tackling poverty, I think there's a big issue about childcare, and I think that's got significance for play as well. So I think we realise it's difficult for families to juggle everything that's asked of them. Part of the solution, and the government recognise this, is trying to provide more accessible and more affordable childcare to allow parents to enter the labour market. Now, that's part of the solution, but I think an equal part of that solution is how we parent, and we've talked about that already, Marguerite. So we shouldn't just be looking for a childcare solution to enable parents to take part in the labour market. We should also be, accepting that maybe older children are able to have a greater degree of independence. We should be less, our parenting should be less intensive, slightly more distant, trusting children a little bit more. So that's slightly moving back. I'm not advocating latchkey kids. I mean, let me be clear about it. I'm not going back to the worst of yesteryear or kids that somehow weren't cared for. But I think a little rolling back would make it a little bit easier to achieve one of those problems that we have, which is the difficulty in juggling parental care as well as accessing the labour market. So we could use play to make the childcare solutions likely to be more effective. And I don't think that's part of the agenda just now. That might be something we might want to consider. We also have to get that childcare provision right. So that childcare provision has got to not be another institutionalisation of children's time. So that might be another opportunity really to think about what play could be. So childcare is not just a service that's provided to parents to enable parents to enter the labour market, but the childcare that's provided provides lots of opportunities for children to enrich their lives through play. So the quality of childcare, and not seeing it just as a care issue, but also as an opportunity for children to grow issue, I think is important. And that's just one solution I've talked about there. But a whole bundle of issues that I think play is relevant to that solution, and I'm not sure that we've thought that through carefully enough just now. I think other solutions to poverty, that we've got to be quite frank about it. There's just got to be more pounds and pence in the pockets of the very poorest families, whether we like it or not. You know, the way to participate in society is to have enough money to be able to do the basics and to be able to feed and clothe our children and to heat our houses, which we know is going to be an issue. We weren't expecting to be a problem these coming months, but it is going to be with the increases in fuel. We need to rebalance. You know, there needs to be more pounds and pence in the pockets of families if we're serious about tackling poverty. So childcare, one issue. I think the pounds and pence in the pockets of parents, and there are various ways that can achieve, but I think it really has to happen if we're serious about tackling poverty. Would be a second solution to that as well. But my third one would be, you know, taking those longer term visions about what a society should be, and that's where things such as play become important. Poverty is an outcome of what we're not doing right. It's a problem that is both a cause of other problems and reflects things that we've not got right. I think we have to have a vision of what we want society to be, and then we have to work towards that. And if we work towards what an ideal society to be, and in my mind that's a society where everybody has the opportunity to realise their potential, then play's got a very important part to play in that. And I talked right at the start about how as a nation, you know, our economy, our health outcomes, our education, even our sense of inclusion and community as a nation would all be enhanced if we got play right. So I think there are fundamental ways in which if we were a play-rich nation, then it's very likely that we would reduce the chances of people living in poverty as a result of all the positive consequences that accrue through realising the value of play. So put in the spot, you didn't even give me a pre-warning on this, Marguerite. But my three solutions was have a childcare solution that takes play seriously, more pounds and pence in the pockets of families that don't have enough, and have a vision of society that aims to create opportunity for all, and a key aspect of that is the role of play in achieving those outcomes.
John McKendrick, thank you very much. It's been a huge pleasure speaking to you today.
Thanks, Marguerite. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you for joining us on this podcast. Next time, we will be looking at play and gender equality. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your preferred app and join the conversation by using the hashtag #PlayWellPodcast. And find out more about Play Scotland by following us on Twitter @PlayScotland and visit our website, playscotland.org.